We'll start Book 1, the Book of Beginnings. Canto 2, the Issue. A while withdrawn in secret fields of thought, her mind moved in a many-imaged past that lived again and saw its end approach. Dying, it lived imperishably in her. So her mind moved in a many-imaged past that lived again and saw its end approach. Dying, it lived imperishably in her, transient and vanishing from transient eyes, invisible, a fateful ghost of self. It bore the future on its phantom breast, along the fleeting events' far backward trail, regressed the stream of the insistent hours, and on the bank of the mysterious flood, peopled with well-loved forms now seen no more, and the subtle images of things that were, her witness spirit stood reviewing time. All that she once had hoped and dreamed and been flew past her eagle-winged through memory's skies, as in a many-hued flaming inner dawn, her life's broad highways and its sweet bypaths lay mapped to her sun-clear recording view. From the bright country of her childhood's days and the blue mountains of her soaring youth, and the paradise groves and peacock wings of love, to joy clutched under the silent shadow of doom, in a last turn where heaven raced with hell. 12 passionate months led in a day of fate. This is again very important. So here again suddenly he brings it in this one line. The rest of it is all Savitri's going back to her childhood days, the memories of everything that she has so far lived with Satyavan. But this one line, 12 passionate months led in a day of fate. So the 12 passionate months is the 12 months she was married to Satyavan, and today is the day of fate, that is, the day when Satyavan, she knows, must die. And then this is a wonderful passage by Sri Aurobindo, the narrator, which is something that is universal. It falls on every human being. An absolute supernatural darkness falls on man sometimes when he draws near to God. An hour arrives when fail all nature's means, forced out from the protecting ignorance and flung back on his naked primal need, he at length must cast from him his surface soul and be the ungarbed entity within. That hour had fallen now on Savitri, a point she had reached where life must be in vain, or in her unborn element awake. Her will must cancel her body's destiny, for only the unborn spirit's timeless power can lift the yoke imposed by birth in time. Only the self that builds this figure of self with a capital S, and the small s is of course the ego, the outer self, the body and the whole personality. Only the self that builds this figure of self can raise the fixed interminable line that joins these changing names, these numberless lives. So this, what you call as destiny or fate, or can only be erased by the self, which is the higher Jivatma, that can raise the fixed interminable line that joins these changing names, these numberless lives, these new oblivious personalities, and keep still lurking in our conscious acts the trail of old forgotten thoughts and deeds. So these lines of these, this what you call as samskaras, karma, everything, past lives, all that sanskaras, everything can only be erased by the higher self. And that is what Savitri has to do now to reach that superhuman, divinized state where she is no longer bound by the mortal laws. Because how can she pursue death otherwise? How can she leave her body on earth and go back and go into the realms of death unless she has abolished her, what he calls as the lower self, the small self, which is the mortal element in her, which is the ego, which is the sanskaras, her old karmas, her old, whatever, all that is behind her. She has to erase everything. So that hour had fallen now on Savitri. Otherwise, her life would be in vain. The trail of old forgotten thoughts and deeds disown the legacy of our buried selves, the burdensome airship to our vanished forms, accepted blindly by the body and soul. Body and soul, you please note the small b and the small s. Don't get confused. This is not the oversoul. This is the soul of desire, the prana. So all of us, this is the same thing. Whether we don't know it, but we are mostly not only just acting from what we are, our personality and our form and our this birth, but numberless births behind. The samskaras have a deep influence on who we are today and how we behave. So this is what Sri Aurobindo here is alluding to, that Savitri now has to either erase all that, or she will have to continue to live her life the way she's been living and accept Satyavan's death without being able to change it. So, but if she wants to change it, she will have to erase the burdensome, what is the exact word? The burdensome airship to our vanished forms. Please note the word "our." So this is a universal statement. So what is our vanished form? Previous births, yes. Previous lives. Very important, very, very important as a state or stage in yoga. This has to be done. That all our previous lives, all the samskaras, karmas, all of that has to be erased. If one has to rise into the new life, the new consciousness, the divine consciousness. Forget about this life's samskaras and this life's problems. You have to also erase all your other lives. So it's not so easy. An episode in an unremembered tale. Who is an episode? Our lives, yes. An episode in an unremembered tale, because we don't remember what happened before this life. Its beginning lost, its motive and plot concealed, a once living story has prepared and made our present fate, child of past energies. The fixity of the cosmic sequences, fastened with hidden inevitable links, she must disrupt, dislodge by her soul's force her past, a block on the immortal's road. So you remember last time we spoke about how the samskaras and the atavisms, yes. So these have to be got rid of, and Savitri does that. She dislodges these by her soul's force, her past. She dislodges her past. Not just the past of this present birth, but the past of all her numberless births before. So all her past karmas, her samskaras have to be first dislodged and erased, raised from the ground, before she can begin to do the yoga that will help her to transform herself and the earth, the yoga of the earth, the yoga of Savitri, the yoga of transformation, and the yoga that can help her to conquer death. So that is why it is called the Holocaust of the Mother. When the Divine Mother comes down, she has to enter into the human ignorance and has to work out everything from start, including human nature, ignorance, atavism, sanskaras, karmas, everything. And that is why it's called the Holocaust of the Mother, because it's almost like when an atom bomb is thrown into a place and it burns everything. So it's almost like the divine has to burn itself through, because it has to enter mortality and mortal ignorance knowingly and consciously. In the sense, somewhere that, of course, in the beginning that is not conscious, as it takes time for that consciousness to come, that, but there is a sense that there is something divine. And if you see, the mother said that I became conscious of my divinity, of something divine, of the divine presence at the age of 3, and Sri Aurobindo a little later. But this is even the avatar or the divine mother, when she comes down, has to work through human nature. So her past a block on the immortal's road, her past a block on the immortal's road. So you cannot conquer death, you cannot achieve immortality, and unless the entire past has been worked through and erased. She must disrupt, dislodge by her soul's forced her past, a block on the immortal's road, make a raised ground and shape anew her fate. No, erase. Actually, it's erase, raise to the ground, yeah. R-A-S-E. Make a raised ground in her. You say that your slate has to be cleaned and polished. What is the slate? The slate of your consciousness, of Savitri's consciousness. A colloquy of the original gods. What is a colloquy? Dialogue, like a speech. A colloquy of the original gods, meeting upon the borders of the unknown. Her soul's debate with embodied nothingness must be wrestled out on a dangerous dim background. Soul's debate with embodied nothingness is death. Her being must confront its formless cause. Against the universe, weigh its single self. On the bare peak where self is alone with naught, and life has no sense and love no place to stand, she must plead her case upon extinction's verge. In the world's death cave, uphold life's helpless claim, and vindicate her right to be and love. Altered must be nature's harsh economy. Acquittance she must win from her past's bond. See, this is very important. All the time Sri Aurobindo refers to this over and over again in the issue. Acquittance she must win from her past's bond. And old account of suffering exhaust, which means that she has to suffer, because she has to exhaust that old account, that debit and credit balance of the karmic consequences of her past birth. So an old account of suffering exhaust. If one thinks that the divine does not suffer, that is a misconception. An old account of suffering exhaust, strike out from time the soul's long compound debt, and the heavy servitudes of the karmic gods, the slow revenge of unforgiving law, and the deep need of universal pain and hard sacrifice and tragic consequence. Out of a timeless barrier she must break, penetrate with her thinking depths the void's monstrous hush, look into the lonely eyes of immortal death, and with her nude spirit measure the infinite's night. The great and dolorous moment now was close. A mailed battalion marching to its doom. The last long days went by with heavy tramp, long but too soon to pass, too near the end. So this time when Satyavan must die was nearing close. Alone amid the many faces loved, aware among unknowing happy hearts, her armored spirit kept watch upon the hours, listening for a foreseen tremendous step in the closed beauty of the inhuman wilds. A combatant in silent dreadful lists, the world unknowing for the world she stood. No helper had she, save the strength within. There was no witness of terrestrial eyes. The gods above and nature's soul below were the spectators of that mighty strife. Around her were the austere sky-pointing hills, and the green murmurous broad deep-thoughted woods muttered incessantly their muffled spell. A deep, magnificent, coloured, self-wrapped life, draped in the leaves, vivid emerald monotone, and set with checkered sunbeams and blithe flowers, immured her destiny's secluded scene. There had she grown to the stature of her spirit, the genius of titanic silences, steeping her soul in its wide loneliness, had shown to her herself's bare reality, and mated her with her environment. Its solitude greatened her human hours with the background of the eternal and unique, a force of spare direct necessity, reduced the heavy framework of man's days and his overburdening mass of outward needs to a first thin strip of simple animal wants, and the mighty wildness of the primitive earth, and the brooding multitude of patient trees, and the musing sapphire leisure of the sky, and the solemn weight of the slowly passing months, had left in her deep room for thought and God. There was her drama's radiant prologue lived, a spot for the eternal's tread on earth, set in the cloistral yearning of the woods, and watched by the aspiration of the peaks, appeared through an aureate opening in time, where stillness, listening, felt the unspoken word, and the hours forgot to pass towards grief and change. Here, with the suddenness divine advents have, repeating the marvel of the first descent, changing to rapture the dull earthly round, love came to her, hiding the shadow death. Well might he find in her his perfect shrine, since first the earth being's heavenward growth began, through all the long ordeal of the race. Never a rarer creature bore his shaft, that burning test of the Godhead in our parts, a lightning from the heights on our abyss. So here, love came to her hiding the shadow death. Well might he find in her his perfect shrine. Who? Love's perfect shrine might be found in Savitri. Why? Because since first the earth being's heavenward growth began, through all the long ordeal of the race, never a rarer creature bore his shaft, the shaft of love, love's shaft, the arrow from love that goes. Never a rarer creature, such a high creature, through all the long ordeal of the race. That burning test of the Godhead in our parts, a lightning from the heights on our abyss. All in her pointed to a nobler kind. So this one sentence in the end, these are called these epigrammatic sentences, which are these one-off sentences that have great power and mantric meaning behind them. All in her pointed to a nobler kind. In that one sentence, the narrator has given you everything about Savitri. All in her pointed to a nobler kind. So, while describing, there are several such sentences throughout, scattered in Savitri. This is one of them. All in her pointed to a nobler kind. So this is also one of the mantric verses in Savitri, written from the overmental consciousness that Amalda and Niruddha had pointed out to me. I had once mentioned to you that Savitri can be used also for healing. So this is one of those passages when he had a fracture. He used Savitri to get his fracture healed. So these are very, very potent passages which you should learn by heart because they have a lot of power in them. So this passage just begins. All in her pointed to a nobler kind. Near to earth's wideness, intimate with heaven, exalted and swift, her young, large-visioned spirit. This is a wonderful description of Savitri, who she is. So, near to earth's wideness, intimate with heaven, exalted and swift, her young, large-visioned spirit, voyaging through worlds of splendor and of calm, overflew the ways of thought to unborn things. Ardent was her self-poised, unstumbling will, her mind a sea of white sincerity, passionate in flow, had not one turbid wave. As in a mystic and dynamic dance, a priestess of immaculate ecstasies, imagined and ruled from truth's revealing vault, moves in some prophet cavern of the gods, a heart of silence in the hands of joy, inhabited with rich creative beats, a body like a parable of dawn that seemed a niche for veiled divinity. O golden temple door to things beyond. So this is a description of Savitri's self, her mind, her body, her emotions, every part of herself. Her mind a sea of white sincerity, her heart of silence in the hands of joy, a body like a parable of dawn that seemed a niche for veiled divinity, or golden temple door to things beyond. Immortal rhythm swayed in her time-born steps. Her look, her smile awoke celestial sense. Even in earth's stuff and their intense delight poured a supernal beauty on men's lives. A wide self-giving was her native act, a magnanimity as of sea or sky, enveloped with its greatness all that came, and gave a sense as of a greatened world. Her kindly care was a sweet temperate sun, her high passion a blue heaven's equipoise, as might a soul fly like a hunted bird, escaping with tired wings from a world of storms, and a quiet reach like a remembered breast, in a haven of safety and splendid soft repose, one could drink life back in streams of honey fire, recover the lost habit of happiness, feel her bright nature's glorious ambience, and preen joy in her warmth and colours rule, a deep of compassion, a hushed sanctuary, her inward help unbarred a gate in heaven. Love in her was wider than the universe. The whole world could take refuge in her single heart. The great unsatisfied Godhead here could dwell. So the great unsatisfied Godhead of love could at last dwell in her. The great unsatisfied Godhead here could dwell. Vacant of the dwarf self's imprisoned air, her mood could harbour his sublimer breath. Spiritual, that can make all things divine. For even her gulfs were secrecies of light. At once she was the stillness and the word, a continent of self-diffusing peace, an ocean of untrembling virgin fire. The strength, the silence of the gods were hers. In her he found a vastness like his own. His high, warm, subtle ether he refound, and moved in her as in his natural home. In her he met his own eternity. So it's also, there is a dual meaning in this, the love and also Satyavan, both. Till then no mournful line had barred this ray on the frail breast of this precarious earth, since her orbed sight in its breath-fastened house, opening in sympathy with happier stars, where life is not exposed to sorrowful change. So till the time that she met Satyavan and after she got to know that he will die, till such time no mournful line had barred this ray. She had not come across grief or any other kind of suffering. Till then no mournful line had barred this ray on the frail breast of this precarious earth, since her orbed sight in its breath-fastened house, opening in sympathy with happier stars, where life is not exposed to sorrowful change, remembered beauty death climbed lids ignore, and wondered at this world of fragile forms carried on canvas strips of shimmering time, The impunity of unborn mites was hers. Although she leaned to bear the human load, her walk kept still the measures of the gods. Earth's breath had failed to stain that brilliant glass, unsmeared with the dust of our mortal atmosphere. It still reflected heaven's spiritual joy. Almost they saw who lived within her light, her playmate in the sempiternal spheres, descended from its unattainable realms. In her attracting advent's luminous wake, the white fire dragon bird of endless bliss. The white fire, a dragon bird of endless bliss, drifting with burning wings above her days, heaven's tranquil shield guarded the missioned child. A glowing orbit was her early term, years like gold raiment of the gods that pass. Her youth sat throned in calm felicity. But joy cannot endure until the end. There is a darkness in terrestrial things that will not suffer long too glad a note. So this is a very important psychological fact in all our lives, that joy cannot, in mortality, in the human life, in mortal life, no joy can endure until the end. Why? Because there is a darkness in terrestrial things. The nature of the world is such that there is a darkness, there is an inconscience, there is an unconsciousness. There is a darkness in terrestrial things that will not suffer long too glad a note. On her too closed the inescapable hand, and this darkness is something that nobody can escape from, whether you're the avatar or the divine mother or whatever. So on her too closed the inescapable hand, the armed immortal bore the snare of time. So the armed immortal Savitri bore the snare of time, so time's hand. One dealt with her who meets the burdened great, a signer of the ordeal and the path, who chooses in this holocaust of the soul. So here you have the word. Because where else was this written, the holocaust of the mother? I had read it in some other writings, not sure. So here it's very clear. One dealt with her who meets the burdened great. Now, we've probably read Savitri a dozen times. But each time you read it, certain words and certain meanings keep revealing themselves. There is no end to understanding Savitri. A signer of the ordeal and the path, who chooses in this holocaust of the soul, death, fall and sorrow, as the spirit's goads. So the divine mother, the divine presence, the divine has chosen to come down on earth and the holocaust of the soul, and suffer that holocaust, because it is the only way. Death, fall and sorrow are the three things that will goad the spirit to go to the next step of evolution, will push the spirit to overcome its human limitations and boundaries and consciousness. So these are the three things. This is the real reason why there is deep sorrow, suffering, death. And those who try and escape from it and refuse to accept it, instead of being able to, that's why mother said, every one of us, she used to tell the children of the ashram, that you must develop nerves of steel. Why did she say that? Endurance, yeah. So be able to face the hardships of life, to be able to, not just the physical hardships, the emotional hardships, the mental hardships, hardships and the suffering is at all levels, not just one. Now, in the army, as the general is here, they are taught to face physical hardship with equanimity and the body, and to be able to. But now a lot of people in the army, if they're not trained emotionally, they collapse. Emotionally, they become, distraught. That's why you have all these mental problems, and some can't take it. So this is the thing why, so much of physical education mother stressed on, is because through physical education, one can begin to develop the nerves, of steel. But not just through physical education, then comes the education of the vital being, and then the education of the mind. So, but the body is the starting point. So here you see, even the divine herself, a signer of the ordeal and the path, who chooses in this holocaust of the soul, death, fall and sorrow, as the spirit's goads, the dubious Godhead with his torch of pain. So with his torch of pain, the dubious Godhead, with his torch of pain, lit up the chasm of the unfinished world, and called her to fill with her vast self the abyss. And called her fill the vast self of the abyss. So the dubious goddess, just because Savitri was the embodiment of the divine and she came down, so this was her mission. So unless she had the holocaust of the soul had not taken place, then only she can fill the abyss that the world is calling her to change. The abyss of darkness, the abyss of inconsciousness, the abyss of inconscience, of suffering, of death. So one dealt with her who meets the burdened great, a signer of the ordeal and the path, who chooses in the... So what was the question? Who? A signer of the ordeal and the path. One dealt with her who meets the burden. I think it's time, or not death. A signer of the ordeal and the path. You could call time, you could call, the world. It's... so one is with the armed immortal boar, the snare of time. One dealt with her.
Snare of time.
Yeah. It's possibly a reference to time. And so one dealt with her who meets the burdened great, a signer of the ordeal and the path, who chooses in this holocaust of the soul. Death, fall and sorrow as the spirit's codes, the dubious Godhead with his torch of pain, lit up the chasm of the unfinished world. So this dubious Godhead is definitely death. So the dubious Godhead with his torch of pain, because death is the only thing that, with his torch of pain, lit up the chasm of the unfinished world and called her to fill with her vast self the abyss. August and pitiless in his calm outlook, heightening the eternal's dreadful strategy, he measured the difficulty with the might and dug more deep the gulf that all must cross. Assailing her divinest elements, what does assailing mean? Attacking, yes. Assailing her divinest elements, he made her heart kin to the striving human heart. Otherwise, how can the heart of the divine become kin, meaning kindred, means become one, similar to the striving human? How can it identify with humanity, with our mortality, unless the same experience that we go through is gone through by her? So this is what he actually pushes Savitri to experience every single thing and every single moment of suffering, joy, whatever that the human beings do. So assailing her divinest element, by attacking her divinest element, pushing it, he made her heart kin to the striving human heart and forced her strength to its appointed road. For this she had accepted mortal breath. So it is this, in a sense, death had a very important role. Death is also synonymous with the pain, ignorance, darkness. Yeah, so all this. So this is what it did. This is what death does. He made her heart kin to the striving human heart and forced her strength to its appointed road. For this she had accepted mortal breath. So her soul had accepted to come down on earth and become human for this purpose, not just to have a happy time. You understand? So for this she had accepted mortal breath, to wrestle with the shadow she had come. Now here is the issue. Here is what Sri Aurobindo is saying. To wrestle with the shadow she had come, and must confront the riddle of man's birth and life's brief struggle in dumb matter's night. And she must confront the riddle of man's birth and life's brief struggle in dumb matter's night, whether to bear with ignorance and death, or hew the ways of immortality. Whether she is able to hew the path to immortality or succumb to death and ignorance. That is something that freedom is there, that choice, and whether she has the strength to do that. See, even the divine, when it comes down into mortality, has to accept mortal ways and mortal laws and mortal methods and mortal suffering, and therefore is bound by the iron law of mortality. And that struggle has to be fought again. It's not a fun thing. It's not something that's already been done. It's easy. It's very difficult. And even the success or failure is left open. It's not a miracle. So sometimes there is a success and sometimes it's not possible. So then there's another pralaya or another birth or another chance. So he made her heart kin to the striving human heart and forced her strength to its appointed road. In fact, towards the end, Mother said that this time there won't be a pralaya, because there have been 7 pralayas where somehow the world has had to dissolve and restart in a sense. But she said now it will continue because the work has been done. The supramental consciousness has been established on earth and in the body and in the earth consciousness. So there will not be a need for a total destruction of the world, for the new consciousness to come. Often that is required, but this is not. That's what she said. So now you all have to read the agenda to understand all that. Now, he made her heart kin to the striving human heart and forced her strength to its appointed road. For this she had accepted mortal breath, to wrestle with the shadow she had come, and must confront the riddle of man's birth and life's brief struggle in dumb matter's night, whether to bear with ignorance and death, or hew the ways of immortality. To win or lose the godlike game for man. To win or lose, please mark, there are no certainties here. Otherwise it is said to win the godlike game for man. So there's no to win the godlike game for man. To win or lose the godlike game for man. Was her soul's issue thrown with destiny's dice. But not to submit and suffer was she born. To lead, to deliver was her glorious part. Here was no fabric of terrestrial make, fit for a day's use by busy careless powers, an image fluttering on the screen of fate, half animated for a passing show, or a castaway on the ocean of desire, flung to the eddies in a ruthless sport, and tossed along the gulfs of circumstance, a creature born to bend beneath the yoke, a chattel and a plaything of time's lords, or one more pawn who comes destined to be pushed, one slow move forward on a measureless board in the chess play of the earth's soul with doom. Such is the human figure drawn by time. Conscious frame was here, a self-born force. In this enigma of the dusk of God, this slow and strange, uneasy compromise of limiting nature with a limitless soul, where all must move between an ordered chance and an uncaring blind necessity, too high the fire spiritual dare not blaze. This is again one of those lines. Too high the fire spiritual dare not blaze. If once it met the intense original flame, an answering touch might shatter all measures made, and earth sink down with the weight of the infinite. So this is the reason why. A jail is this immense material world. Across each road stands armed a stone-eyed law. At every gate, the huge dim sentinel space, a grey tribunal of the ignorance, an inquisition of the priests of night. In judgment sit on the adventurer soul, and the dual tables and the karmic norm restrain the titan in us and the God. This is very important. This immense material universe is a jail, and at each road stands a stone-eyed law, and huge dim sentinels stand at every gate, and a great tribunal of the ignorance. An inquisition of the priests of night in judgment sit on the adventurous soul. And the dual tables and the karmic norm restrain the titan in us and the God. So both the karmic law and the karmic norm both restrain the titan, the asura in us, the asuric nature in us, and the divine nature. Both are restrained. Pain with its lash, joy with its silver bribe, guard the wheels circling immobility. A bond is put on the high climbing mind, a seal on the too large, wide open heart. Death stays the journeying discoverer, life. Thus is the throne of the inconscient safe. And this is how the inconscient keeps his own reign and his own throne in this material world safe by putting a seal on too large a wide open heart and a bond on the high climbing mind, and uses and restrains the asura and the divine in us. Pain with its lash. By how? By pain with its lash restrains the asuric nature, and joy with its silver bribe restrains the god-like nature. Because when you bribe by the pleasures of the world, the soul loses itself in the outward life and in all the pleasures. So in this way, the inconscient keeps its very strong hold on earth and on life, and death stays the journeying discoverer life. So life is not continuous. Death comes in between. Thus is the throne of the inconscient safe, while the tardy coilings of the eons pass, and the animal browses in the sacred fence, and the gold hawk can cross the skies no more. So this tardy coiling, eons and eons pass, with death restraining life, pain and joy with its silver bribe, and thus is the throne of the inconscient safe. And the animal browses in the sacred fence because it can't get out of its fenced nature, and the gold hawk can cross the skies no more. The golden hawk, symbol of the soul, psychic, can cross the skies no more. But one stood up and lit the limitless flame. Just this one line changes everything. But one stood up and lit the limitless flame, arraigned by the dark power that hates all bliss, in the dire court where life must pay for joy, sentenced by the mechanic justicer to the afflicting penalty of man's hopes, her head she bowed not to the stark decree. So this one who stood up and lit the limitless flame is Savitri, and she refused to bow her head to the stark decree of death, pain, and suffering. So arraigned by the dark powers that hates all bliss, in the dire court where life must pay for joy, sentenced by the mechanic justicer to the afflicting penalty of man's hopes, her head she bowed not to the stark decree, bearing her helpless heart to destiny's stroke. So bows and must the mind-born will in man, obedient to the statutes fixed of old, admitting without appeal the nether gods. So unlike the man, she refused to bow, that one who stood up to light the limitless flame. Unlike man and human beings and human nature, she refused to bow, while man so bows and must, the mind-born will in man, while man is obedient to the old fixed rules of life and death and rebirth. This one person, one being stood up, and she refused to bow her head. Obedient, so bows and must the mind-born will in man, obedient to the statutes fixed of old, admitting without appeal the nether gods. And man, without even appealing, without any kind of barrier, allows the nether, the dark gods, the inconscient gods to enter into his nature, while she refused to allow that. In her the superhuman cast its seed. And therefore, because she refused to bow her head to the decree of death, the superhuman could cast its seed in her. In her the superhuman cast its seed, inapt to fold its mighty wings of dream. Her spirit refused to hug the common soil. So it is Savitri's spirit who refused to hug the common soil, or finding all life's golden meanings robbed, compound with earth, struck from the starry list, or quench with black despair the God-given light, accustomed to the eternal and the true. Her being conscious of its divine founts, asked not from mortal frailty pain's relief, So you see, because she was accustomed to the eternal and the true, and totally conscious of her divine founts, means the origins, where the divine nature and the divine consciousness came from. Therefore, she, unlike human beings, asked not for mortal frailty, pain's relief. She did not ask for relief from the terrible suffering and pain that she had to undergo. She said she happily went through it because she was aware of her divine nature. So, human beings, we run from pain. We run from suffering. We want relief from too much pain and too much suffering. But not so this one being who stood up and refused to bow her head to the inconscient gods. So, accustomed to the eternal and the true, her being conscious of its divine founts, asked not from mortal frailty, pain's relief, patched not with failure, bargain or compromise, did not patch or make a compromise with failure or bargain or compromise with anything. A work she had to do, a word to speak. She had come here to do a work, and a word, they say vak, the power of the word can change the universe. So, a work she had to do, a word to speak, writing the unfinished story of her soul. In thoughts and actions graved in nature's book, she accepted not to close the luminous page, cancel her commerce with eternity, or set a signature of weak assent to the brute balance of the world's exchange. So, because she had a work to do and a word to speak, she refused to close the luminous page and cancel her commerce with eternity, her interaction with eternity, or set a signature of weak assent, or give her assent, or give her consent to the brute balance of the world's exchange. A force in her that toiled since earth was made, accomplishing in life the great world plan, pursuing after death immortal aims, repugned to admit frustration's barren role, forfeit the meaning of her birth in time, obey the government of the casual fact, or yield her high destiny up to passing chance. So, there was a force in her that toiled since earth was made, accomplishing in life the great world plan, and pursuing after death immortal aims, and this refused to admit frustration's barren role and forfeit the meaning of her birth in time. She refused to give up and to forfeit the reason she had taken birth in the world, and refused to obey the government of the casual fact or yield her high destiny up passing chance. In her own self she found her high recourse. She matched with the iron law her sovereign right. Her single will opposed the cosmic rule. To stay the wheels of doom, this greatness rose. So why did Savitri take birth, and what was the issue of the whole epic that Sri Aurobindo is here presenting in this wonderful canto called The Issue? She came to stay the wheels of doom. The wheels of doom is the wheels of the inscrutable law of death. So she came to stay the wheels of doom. This greatness rose. At the unseen's knock upon her hidden gates, her strength made greater by the lightning's touch, awoke from slumber in her heart's recess. It bore the stroke of that which kills and saves. Across the awful march no eye can see, barring its dreadful route no will can change. She faced the engines of the universe. So, here again, what does Savitri do? Her strength is made greater by the lightning's touch. As more pain and more lightning and more friction came, she became greater by that. And she bore the stroke of that which kills and saves. Across the awful march no eye can see, barring its dreadful route no will can change. She faced the engines of the universe. So this is who Savitri was facing, the entire engine of the entire universe she faced. A heart stood in the way of the driving wheels. Its giant workings paused in front of a mind. Its stark conventions met the flame of a soul. A magic leverage suddenly is caught that moves the veiled, ineffable's timeless will. A prayer, a master act, a king idea can link man's strength to a transcendent force. Here's the most beautiful lines that really uplift us to understand how the human will, if it is linked to the transcendent will, can change destiny, can change the evolutionary destiny of man, can change the evolutionary destiny of the earth. So a heart stood in the way of the driving wheels of doom and death. Its giant workings paused in front of a mind, the mind of Savitri. Its stark conventions met the flame of a soul. A magic leverage suddenly is caught that moves the veiled, ineffable's timeless will. Prayer, so just a simple prayer, a master act, a king idea, can link man's strength to a transcendent force, as it did with Savitri. Then miracle is made the common rule. One mighty deed can change the course of things. One mighty deed can change the course of things. A lonely thought become omnipotent. All now seems nature's massed machinery, an endless servitude to material rule. But what is right now, which we see around us, is nature's massed machinery, and this endless servitude to a material rule of life and death and rebirth and decay and suffering and pain and bliss and joy and so on. It seems like this will never change. Can you imagine the world and earth changing? It seems it will never happen, that a new light, a supramental, immortal being, that man can become totally immortalized in his physical consciousness and body. So that is what Sri Aurobindo is saying here. The voice of the narrator starts, one mighty deed can change the course of things. So all of this Sri Aurobindo is saying and explaining in this wonderful canto of the issue. Then miracle is made the common rule. One mighty deed can change the course of things. A lonely thought becomes omnipotent. All now seems nature's massed machinery, an endless servitude to material rule, and long determination's rigid chain. Her firm and changeless habits aping law. Whose firm and changeless habits? Nature. He says, even though it seems that nature will never change, and evolutionary nature will never change, and death will never be surpassed, yet it is only her firm and changeless nature, and her firm and changeless habits, our own habits, aping law with a capital L. Seems like law that could never change, the iron law. Her empire of unconscious deaf device annul the claim of man's free human will. He too is a machine amid machines. What is man after all? The present human mortal is a machine amid machines. A prison brain pumps out the shapes of thought. A beating heart cuts out emotions' modes. An insentient energy fabricates a soul. Or the figure of the world reveals the signs of a tired chance repeating her old steps. In circles round matter's binding post. So presently nature, which is bound to the unconscious law, unconscious and changeless habits of nature, makes man too a machine amid machines, a piston brain, a beating heart, cutting out emotions' modes, an insentient energy fabricating a soul. Or the figure of a world reveals the signs of a tide chance repeating her old steps in circles around matter's binding posts, a random series of inept events to which reason lends elusive sense is here, or the empiric life's instinctive search, or a vast ignorant mind's colossal work. But wisdom comes, and vision grows within. Then nature's instrument crowns himself her king. But wisdom comes, and vision grows within, and it is only then man as nature's instrument crowns himself her king. He feels his witnessing self and conscious power. His soul steps back and sees the light supreme. A Godhead stands behind the brute machine. This truth broke in a triumph of fire. So, it is when wisdom comes and this vision grows, then his soul steps back and sees the light supreme. And a Godhead stands behind the brute machine of man's outer nature. This truth broke in a triumph of fire. A victory was won for God in man. A victory was won for God in man. So when this happens, it is a victory of God in man. This truth broke in a triumph of fire. A victory was won for God in man. The deity revealed its hidden face. The great world mother now in her arose. A living choice reversed fate's cold dead turn, affirmed the spirit's tread on circumstance, pressed back the senseless dire revolving wheel, and stopped the mute march of necessity. A flaming warrior from the eternal peaks, empowered to force the door denied and closed, smote from death's visage its dumb absolute, and burst the bounds of consciousness and time. And then when this happened, when the great world mother arose in Savitri, a living choice reversed fate's cold dead term, and pressed back the senseless, dire revolving wheel of death and life and doom, and stopped the mute march of necessity. And then what happened? A flaming warrior from the eternal peaks, empowered to force the door denied and closed, smote from death's visage its dumb absolute, and smote from the visage of death. So smote means it's like a burnt out from death's image, its dumb absolute, and burst the bounds of consciousness and the bounds of time. And that's how, in this particular very, very short canto, Sri Aurobindo sums up the entire epic and bursts the bounds of consciousness and time. End of Canto 2, the issue. And then Canto 3 speaks of the yoga of the king and the yoga of the soul's release. But Canto 2, the issue that is in front of Savitri, the issue about which Savitri is written, the whole book that Sri Aurobindo writes, Savitri, what is the issue? The central issue of Savitri is presented in this canto.